Very good morning, I bid to fellow lecturers and friends present in this auditorium. Please switch off your phone, always wear your mask, and adhere to the SOPs throughout this event. First and foremost, let me shed some light to our respective guests. Associate Professor Dr. Husaina Banu, Deputy Dean of Research and Development, representing the Dean, Dr. Suzili Sirin Abdurrahim, Deputy Dean of Undergraduate Studies, Associate Professor Dr. Adelina Binti Asmawi, Head of Department of Language and Literacy Education, other heads of departments, lecturers, staffs, students, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Adiwiraku series in person, transforming opportunities into challenges. Let us begin by reciting the Fatiha. Amin. I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Husaina Banu, Deputy Dean of Research and Development, for the welcoming speech.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and salam sejahtera. So on behalf of the Faculty of Education, we are honored to welcome Cheryl Ann Fernando, the guest speaker for today, and also our fellow elite. So for our Faculty of Education. So her story and experiences is an inspiration to Malaysian students and teachers alike. Her passion for teaching has contributed to making quality teaching more accessible, especially for underprivileged community and also children from rural areas. She has inspired many by showing anything is possible with continuous effort and adequate resources. I hope this sharing session will prove to be an invaluable resources for us, especially with us future educators. So inshallah all become future educators. So you can see from this sharing session that how actually you can make teaching actually is something that is I would say that inspiring and also valuable for students from diverse background. So as an educator, we have to equip ourselves with various skills to attract our students, to ensure that we can make sure that they get the quality education. So I would like to also congratulate Department of Language and Literacy Education for organizing such a great event. I hope these sharing sessions will be, I would say, very invaluable to us, and also we hope to learn more, and also we hope to actually conduct more this kind of session, especially having with us our guest speaker who will share her experiences with us, and we will benefit from this experience. With that, thank you and Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Husaina. So now can we have Dr. Husaina to give a token of appreciation to Ms. Cheryl? Next, I would like to invite Dr. Adelina to give a token of appreciation to Dr. Husaina. Thank you very much. Adiwiraku won the Best Film at the 29th Malaysia Film Festival. It is a movie that portrays the challenges and beauty of teaching a rural area that are faced by an impeccable teacher. Lucky enough, today, we have the amazing teacher that inspired the movie Adiwiraku, Miss Cheryl Ann Fernando. Miss Cheryl is the CEO of PEMIMPIN GSL from 2017 until today. She was also the Education and Learning Director in EduNation Malaysia from 2016 to 2017. On top of that, she was previously listed among the amazing female role models in Prestige Malaysia 40 Under 40 and was listed in the top 400 young leaders of Asia in 2020. Not to mention, she was the Marie Claire Malaysia in 2008. She was the Marie Claire Amazing Woman in 2018. Last but not least, she was the finalist for Popular Readers' Choice Award for Best Non-Fiction Book in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Fernando.
Hi everyone. Can I take this out? Can, right? Hi everyone. I really hope I live up to all my accolades. I was a bit nervous hearing all of it being read out. I'm like, oh my god, if I don't impress them, then they're going to wonder how I got it. Okay, so thank you everyone for having me. Thank you especially to Prof. Adelina for I think we've been talking for like so long now. We're like, okay, we're going to make this happen, and then lockdowns after lockdowns, but we finally, we're going to do it. And I asked her, I think yesterday, I was like, oh, how many students are coming? And she was like, oh, just 100. I was like, oh no, it's been a while since I spoke to like, I don't think there's 100 of you here, but that's all right. I plan to make this sharing very informal, but at the same time, I hope you will really learn something from perhaps my experiences and maybe the mistakes that I've made so that you don't make such mistakes in your life, or any learnings that you can take from whatever that happened to me. And I think at the end of it, I will stop at like 11:30, I think, so that you can ask questions. All right? Okay? Okay, everyone's really quiet, but okay? All right, okay. So I'm going to do this like a true teacher, okay? So you have to like give me response, not keep quiet. Okay, my name is Cheryl Fernando, and yeah, I'm the CEO of PEMIMPIN. And this picture is like way back then when I was much younger as a teacher. If you go to the next one. So I think okay, we didn't share this. So I have a bachelor in mass communication. So unlike all of you, I wasn't privileged enough to make teaching my first choice of degree. In hindsight, looking back, I would have done that instead. I also have a master's in management from Open University, and finally, and most recently, a postgraduate diploma in education, English language from University Utara, Malaysia. Next, please. All right, so I never set out to be a teacher, right? So I was telling all of you, but what I wanted to do was PR because I studied mass communication. And for 4 years, I worked as a PR consultant, and I was very happy, like relatively happy. You're young and you're a fresh grad, and you go in and you get your first job and you earn some money. And I'm like, okay, this is not bad. And my parents were also quite okay with it because I was working at something that I studied for. So I studied mass comm and I was working as a PR consultant. But while I was working in PR, I used to teach part-time the refugee students in my church and in the community nearby. So every other day after work, I would go and teach the refugee communities. And I realized, I actually like this more than my job. And I would look forward, my job, I will do my best at work, but I would be like waiting for 6 o'clock so I could quickly rush home to go and teach. And I started questioning and asking myself, why did I like this more than my tugas hakiki, right? My core business, my job. And then I realized that maybe inside me, I really wanted to become a teacher. And okay, so this was my life pre-teacher, right? It was very happening, and I from KL, right? So I worked in KL, and it was really nice, it was very exciting and all that. And then one day, much to my parents' disappointment, I left KL to teach. And this was me then. And then this became me. And so I was very young at that time, so I had no obligations unlike now, right? I have a family and kids and all that. And I told my parents, I will do this only for 2 years. And then I will come back and I will go to corporate. And all your money spent on my degree and my MBA is not wasted. And my parents were like, okay. And they were still not convinced that, why would someone who had like a good career in PR want to leave it all to go and teach? But I joined Teach for Malaysia. For those of you who are not aware, Teach for Malaysia is an organization that takes graduates without education degree to become teachers for 2 years in the most highest need schools in the country. And initially, I thought I was going to be posted to KL lah. I was like, okay, maybe it will be KL. And then they said, no, Cheryl, I think you're going to the northern side. So I was like, okay lah, northern Penang, right? I mean, Penang is like KL, right? It's quite happening as well. And then they were like, no, Cheryl, you're going to Kedah. And I was like, oh my God, the only thing I know of Kedah is Langkawi. And I don't think that's a representation of Kedah. So I was like, okay, let's go. And I remember my parents driving me, and I was given the school, like SMK Pinang Tunggal in Sungai Petani, Kedah. And my parents were driving me, and we were just driving and driving. It was like sawah padi and all palm plantations. We were just driving and driving, and I was like, oh my God, is there even a Starbucks here? And I was like, this is it. There was a Starbucks 30 minutes away. Sungai Petani is quite maju now. And I was like, okay, so we went. And I finally found my school. It was a small little school surrounded by paddy fields. It was really beautiful. And I was like, okay lah, let's do this for 2 years. So I'll give you a bit of a background of my school. And honestly, when I went in, I'm a very optimistic person. So I was told that I was going to teach Form 1. So I was like, you know what? My Form 1 students are going to be reading Murakami. They are going to be like reading poems. And I'm going to make them read Enid Blyton. And then I went in to realize that my students could not even spell their names. Like, so many of them were struggling with, if their name is Muhammad, they were like, oh, how many M's are there in my Muhammad in my name? And they had to take out their IC to check the spellings of their name. And these were Form 1 students. Many of them struggled with alphabets. They were at kindergarten level. My students were at kindergarten level. For their reading and comprehension. For their fluency at Form 4, they were only at Standard 2 level. And I was very shocked, but more shocked, I was very angry. Because I came from a government school as well. I went to a normal SK and SMK, and perhaps the area that I was in KL, and the schools that I went to, I was actually very privileged because we had a very good education. But I was thinking, what happened to my students that they reached Form 1 and no one bothered to teach them how to read? Like, how can a child go through so many years of schooling and no one taught them how to read? How can my students reach Form 4 and only be fluent in Standard 2? Their English is at Standard 2. It was very unfair. And but more than angry, so I was very angry, I was very shocked. I also had to tell and realign myself on like what I wanted to do for education, right? So remember I said I came in, I'm macam, okay, you're going to read Enid Blyton and Murakami, and I'm macam, okay, no. So I went back and I really reflected and thought, okay, what is my aim for my students? My aim was I wanted them to be at least functionally literate by the time I left school. At least you can read and you can write and you can communicate in English. And that's very important for me. And if not, at least you're not afraid of English. So I think the first lesson in going in to teach is to always try not to, you come in with all these expectations and all these wonderful things that you want to do in your classroom. But it's also important to understand the situation on the ground and to actually see what is the most urgent and pressing need for the students at that time. And that was so important for me. The second is, of course, I was in Kedah, right? I had no idea Kedah, they had a different logat, right? I was so stuck in my KL bubble. So I went the first day to school and they were like, hang nak pi mana? And I'm like, what is hang? And like, what is pi? And then what is depa, right? It was like depa lah, hang pa lah. And I was like, for those of of you in Penang and the northern side, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. I was completely lost, right? And I was just sitting there like, oh my God, and my students were like, teacher, please understand, teacher duduk sini sat. And I'm like, I don't understand. Because the BM I spoke was completely different. So that was one. It was huge language barriers, but I mean, along the way, you finally get it, right? And I just learned the basics on like how to scold them, like awat hang ketegak, right? That's all I needed to like get them through the lesson. So I learned the basics. So that was one. The second is of course a bit sensitive, but I will say it as well. It's the race and religion part. So in the school that I taught, I was the only non-Malay in my school, teacher, right? And I was the only one like who didn't wear a tudung. And then my name was Cheryl Ann Fernando, right? The where is the Indian in Cheryl Ann Fernando? So my students would be like, teacher, just give us your Indian name. And I'm like, but it's Cheryl. And they're like, no teacher, please, just one Indian name. And I'm like, okay lah, Kasturi if you want. I'll take what I can get. And my students will be like, so teacher, so tell us like, what are you, right? Because essentially to them, I'm like an alien, right? Like this girl coming in with this name that is different. And then I was like, oh, actually, I'm Christian. And they were like, okay, teacher, if you are really Christian, can you speak Bahasa Christian? And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. So we had to go through a lot of, number one, language, number two, a lot of cultural differences as well. And as much as it was a process for my students to understand me, it was also for me to understand them. In demographics, socioeconomy-wise, everything was different from me and my students, right? But how do we then bridge this gap between each other? And I think my biggest challenge, of course, came from the fact that I didn't wear a tudung, obviously, because I'm not Muslim. And they were like, teacher, you tak takut neraka ke? And I must be honest, so honestly, in the first 3 months, I was a bit offended. Macam, every day tell me I'm going to burn in hell. Every day tell me. I'm like, how am I going? And they be like, teacher, satu urat rambut is like, don't know how many thousand times in hell. I'm like, oh no. So, but after 3 months, I used a lot of time to explain to them that, okay, teacher is different, right? I don't have to wear tudung because I'm not Muslim. And then they were like, oh, I see, okay. And then I'm like, I'm Christian, but my race is Indian. And they're like, oh, cannot. So then we would go through, like, I would try not to overwhelm them. Macam, you can accept yang teacher ni non-Muslim lah, Indian, Christian. I'll try not to overwhelm them, but slowly just, if they ask, then I will tell them. But I also learned how to not get so offended because I don't think my students were malicious about it. It came from a good place. They actually truly didn't understand. So I think in just like that for any of you as you're going into school, it's the aim is not to get offended, but to use anything like this as a teaching opportunity for you. And it's not macam, oh my God, how can you say this about me? I'm so terasa. But to like, okay, how can I teach you? How can I educate you? And how can I help you understand better? And towards the end of 3 years, my students were like completely okay with like everything. Okay, teacher is Indian, she's Christian, she doesn't have to wear a tudung, and all these things they knew. And every time a new student would come, they'd be so angry if the new students would be like, oh, teacher tak puasa ke? Like, teacher tak perlu puasa lah. So they would defend me, and I was like, oh, this is great. So it's very important to like build that relationship with your students, and I think that helped to help them even learn better, because we know like research says that students learn best from teachers that they like. It's very hard to learn from people that you don't like. So that was one of my other lessons as well. So I want to share a story about Amirul. Amirul is this boy here. And there's an Amirul here. Alright, okay. So he's one of my favorite students. So when Amirul came to school at Form 1, he completely couldn't even read or write like a single letter in the ABCs, right? And I'm like, oh my God, how did this boy make it to whole Sekolah Rendah without reading and writing? So how do you think that happens? So in Malaysia, we have automatically they are allowed to go to next grade, which is a great policy actually. but it also means that students who are left behind, their learning gaps just keep getting accumulated. So from standard 1 tak boleh baca, no intervention, you promote them to standard 2, and they continuously are not able to read until they reach standard 6. And because of the large class sizes in schools, it's so difficult for a teacher, and I don't blame teachers at all. It's so difficult to differentiate and to have interventions specifically for students who cannot read. You're trying to teach a class of 35. If only 2 children cannot read, you're not going to stop your whole lesson just to teach these 2 children, right? It's not easy. Honestly, it's not easy. It's not practical. So because of that, a lot of students fall through the cracks and they end up being illiterate in schools. And so Amirul was one of them. And I told him, okay, Amirul, I'm going to teach you English lah. Okay, never mind, BM is also important, but because I'm an English teacher, I'll teach you English. And he started reading very fast, right? Within the first few weeks of us going, just repeating, and he would come for every extra class and every day. And I lived near the community in school. So after school, sometimes I just want to nap, but my students would be like, hi teacher, can we do extra class now? I'm like, oh no, shouldn't have given them my address. But they would come every day, knocking at the door to do these extra classes. And I also realized that much more than wanting to learn, my students really wanted attention. A lot of them came from very broken families, families that struggled with a lot of poverty. In my school, we had a lot of drug issues. We had pregnancies every year. And because they came from such broken families, they just wanted someone to like them, to pay attention to them, and to love them, right? And although a lot of maybe research or what will show that teachers must always maintain that professional relationship with students, which I agree, but it didn't hurt for me to actually show them that I liked you as a human being, and I want to be there for you as long as I'm here. And they would always come, and it's just attention, right? Teacher, tengok saya buat apa, teacher, tengok saya buat apa. And like, teacher, look at me. And so I would give them that attention, because I thought, even if at the end of all of this you cannot read, at least you know that someone cares for you and someone loves you and is there for you. And one day when Amirul could read like a full sentence, he was like, oh my God, teacher, not oh my God. He was like, wow, teacher, saya boleh baca. I'm like, yes, exactly. And it was then that I realized that being literate is empowering. Why is it so important for us to get students to be at least functionally literate? Because when they suddenly can read, it just opens up this world to them, and they are very empowered then. And that's what we want to give for every child in Malaysia. And that's what I hold true until today. And I always think of Amirul. Unfortunately, by the time I left school, he also left school with me, even though he was supposed to continue school until Form 5. He left at Form 3. But he was like, at least I can read basic English now. And for me, that is successful, right? Whatever their measure of success or whatever their potential is, I want to help them achieve that. And so this is one of my students traveling back home. I think if you've watched Adiwiraku, you would have seen this story of the child who had a mother who was a bit mentally unwell. See, I can check now how many people is nodding, because I know if you watched it or not. But it's okay if you haven't watched it. I think there's a pirated version on YouTube. But Aisha was one of my students as well, and come from such difficult circumstances. But the moment you show your students that things can change when you learn, and when you want to make your life different, the students will take on, and they will change as well. But I always struggled with, how do you convince a child who is hungry that something long-term like education is the most important thing for them? How do you do that? I didn't know. Because my students will be like, teacher, if I go and cari besi, collect scrap metal, I can make money for now, right? And tomorrow my family will not be hungry. But you are telling me of an education that will come 5 years later for my diploma, for my SPM. It's not guaranteed. So I always battled. I don't have an answer for if you're expecting one. I always battled internally as a teacher. what he says is true. He's hungry, his family is hungry. If he goes and work, he gets the money and he's fed. I am promising him an education that is what? 5 years down the road? So I always said, okay, I understand, but how many days you can come to school, I want you still to come, because when you can read, you can do better at whatever that you're trying to do. And it was helping students just see the small goals that they can get. And that was important, especially for students like Aisha. All right, so now the fun part, right? All these sad stories that I'm telling y'all make y'all feel like, I want to really teach or not, okay? When I started teaching was 2013, was the first year we actually entered the choral speaking competition. And at that time, my students didn't win, obviously, and I was like, oh, okay, but they have potential. Like, they listen to me, and you know, in Kedah, in Logat Kedah, they don't say the S very prominently, right? So it's like kelah, right? Kelas is like kelah, right? So English has a lot of S, right? So the whole thing, I'm like, where is your S in this score? And I was like, oh, it's so frustrating. So the first year was really tough. But I thought, we took a break in 2014. We didn't enter any choral speaking competition. And then in 2015, we thought, okay, let's try again. And this time, we started training very early. So we started training in January for a competition that was in July. And my students practiced and gaduh and all that. And they were very frustrated and they were like, betul ke the competition ni, teacher? From January to July, you are stringing us along with this dream of a choral speaking competition. We don't even know if it's real. But finally, when we entered the competition, so for context, right, we didn't even win, guys. We got 5th place. I feel so bad until today for the school that actually won because they got nothing and we are the ones that went viral. So, and sometimes people ask me, actually, who won the 1st place? And I'm like, oh my God, I can't remember which school won the 1st place. I feel so bad for the school. And we won 5th place, but it was significant because of the school and because of my students, and because like, oh my God, did we ever think we will win 5th place? And I was very excited after we won that I wrote about it, and I was like, oh, I cannot believe that, you know, my small little kampong school can win. And little did I know, the story went viral. It was shared on like all these things, and maybe some of it were not, you know how the media is, right? Some of the interpretation of like 20 elite schools, it wasn't 20 elite schools, like it was 20 schools. Right? So I'm like, okay, too late to change this now. And go to the next one. My school was really proud, and my students in school were so proud because everyone at that time, I think it was 2015, was talking about this school that, you know, this SMK Penang Tunggal school that is such champions, and everyone was talking about it. But for my students, if you go to the next one, what was most important is that Maya Karin put it on her Instagram. So for the next few months, I told my students that Maya Karin is actually my friend, and she's coming to school to watch you speak English. So you better study hard and you better like speak English well. And just winning this competition and just doing all of this really inspired my students to know that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, right? It is not all bleak. It is not all, we're going to work hard and nothing ever. Although people say like all this recognition is very temporary, right? But for my students, it meant so much to them. And they were so proud, and my school leader, my pengetua at that time, would totally ride on it. She'd be like, you have to come to school, you have to dress well, because you don't know when the media is coming. Okay, no media was going to come. You don't know when Maya Karin is going to come. And like, oh, Maya Karin doesn't even know I'm alive. But we are like, okay. So my students were, and we were like, you have to speak more English now, because they're going to come and they're going to test you. The moment you say you're from Penang Tunggal, people are going to speak to you in English. And that really broke that barrier of being very fearful of speaking English, which is another big challenge for any educator, right? If you're going in and teaching English, which is what all of you will do, a lot of students in Malaysia, they're very scared of English, right? It's like a foreign language. They will sing all the Korean songs, but they will not say a word in English. And I'm like, Korean is the foreign language, not English, right? And they were say it, then their friends will be like, oh, speaking, and that immediately kills it, right? So I would actually like close the windows and close the doors, and I'll be like, okay, this is a safe English zone. Like, you can speak English here safely, and no one's gonna laugh at you. And then they would, okay, let's try. So they would slowly try to speak English in that safe zone because they were very scared. And I think that's very important for all of you to know that firstly is to break that barrier of fear of the language. How do you break that? How do you go in and when you're going to teach your first class and you realize that actually all my students are so scared to speak English. They will not say a word. They will not even ask you if they want to go to the toilet. They will wait for the next lesson so they can ask in Malay or Mandarin or Tamil or whatever language they're comfortable with. So I used a lot of songs. So my students like Taylor Swift. So I use a lot of songs. I use a lot of whatever music, Bruno Mars at that time, right? This was 2015. And even some Korean songs that had like 1 or 2 English lines in it. Like, what does this mean? And songs were a way to actually break them from feeling scared about English. I used a lot of conversations with Kononia my celebrity friends, right? All these international people that are my celebrity friends that don't know of. I would say, okay, let's pretend we're having a conversation with this person. And they would do it. The other thing that was important is my students had this perception that orang Melayu tak boleh cakap bahasa Inggeris. They're like, teacher, kenapa kita cakap bahasa penjajah? I'm like, oh my god, I haven't heard this in a while. But so I would bring my Malay friends who could speak English and show them. And they'd be like, oh, ada ke orang Melayu boleh cakap bahasa Inggeris? I'm like, ada, banyak. You just need to know. So it's not a bahasa penjajah. It's not bahasa Israel, or it's all these weird things that my students will say to me. So we really tried to break that barrier. So when you go in and when you teach and when you face these challenges, that's important to know, right? How do you break this to them and how do you make them comfortable with the language? And then by the end of the year that I'm teaching, usually they are like super comfortable with English already. Yeah. Right. Okay, next one. Okay, then Adiwiraku happened. So Adiwiraku happened out of like a lot of luck, I think, maybe good luck on my end. I was already I left school, 2016, I left school, and I got a message on Facebook from like a producer who said, oh Cheryl, we read your stories and we love it and we want to make a movie. And people send you this message, you think it's a scam, right? I'm like, okay, ignore. And then they sent me again like, oh, we are serious. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, is this a scam? So I replied, and then turns out they were really serious. They've already done a lot of research. They've read all the articles that I used to write about my school, and they were like, let's do it. Initially, I didn't want it because, like, who am I for people to make a movie out of my life? I'm just like this small little girl. And I was like, no, I don't think so. But what made me change my mind was they were going to get my students involved. And I knew this was going to change their life. 60 of my students from Pinang Tunggal was going to act in Adiwiraku. They're going to film it in Pinang Tunggal. And whatever money that they made from the movie was going to be channeled back to Pinang Tunggal. And that was like something that made me think, maybe this is what I should do for my students. So I asked my students and they were like, oh my god, from going viral to being celebrities, this is our dream life, teacher. Especially this boy here, Zidane. He was like, this is it, teacher, let's do it. So once they got consent from all their parents and the students, they filmed the movie in about 6 weeks, I think, in the school. And my students were amazing. And I was like, they have never been this confident in class. And here they were like, living their best celebrity lives, right? I was like, who is this? Who are all of you? They were very excited, but also very confused, right? So if you know that my role was played by an actress, right? So they were like, oh, teacher, because you left, now we have a new teacher? And I'm like, no, she's an actress. And they were like, oh, teacher, so is she really going to teach us? I'm like, no, guys, you are acting in a movie. Until today, some of them are still confused and they call her Teacher Cheryl. and like call me like Teacher Cheryl also. I'm like, okay. So they put their heart and soul into acting the movie, and again, we had no expectations, right? We just wanted to do the movie. If you know, when Adiwiraku first came out in 2017, no one even watched it at the cinema because it had no famous actress. It was all the students, and it was Sangeeta, this was her first Malay movie. So no one watched it, or very few people watched it. They had to cut short the screening within a few days because the cinema was just empty, right? And my students were like, teacher, it's okay lah, we go and watch many, many times. And I said, it's okay, people don't watch it, right? What's important is that what you have put out and the effort that you have put in for the movie. But little did we know that it would get picked up by Festival Film. And then my students came all the way from Kedah to KL for the Festival Film, and they rented like suits and like all this glamorous baju to sit in the Festival Film. And again, so I'm very scared of like building their expectations and getting them disappointed. The last thing I want is, it hurts, right, when students that you love so much are disappointed. So I told them, guys, again, it's not important if we win, right? Like, who would even invite us for Festival Film? Who would invite me for Festival Film, right? I'm like, the fact that we're here with all these celebrities, it's great. Just enjoy this experience. Zidane was nominated for Best Child Actor, but he didn't win, but it was okay. I told him even being nominated is great. And then Adiwiraku went on to win Best Original Story, Best Actress, and Best Film. And they were like, oh my God, teacher, I told you once again we can win. And I was like, yes, of course we can. And it did a lot for their confidence. Just to be there, be on stage, right? You can imagine the whole glamorous part of Adiwiraku being on stage and all that. And Adiwiraku went on to be in the Taiwan Film Festival, and Zidane actually represented the movie, and he went to Taiwan. So he told me like, teacher, it's from Pinang Tunggal to Taiwan for me. I'm like, exactly, that's what it is. And many of them, until today, I tell them that this movie is important and significant because it shows that when you work hard for something, like your luck can change, right? And things can happen even way greater than what you planned for. And you can always hold true to this and what happened to you in Adiwiraku. Till today, if you go to their Instagram profiles, it like says Adiwiraku, which is a bit much. I'm like, guys, it's been 5 years or like 6 years. Till today, they are very proud of it. They would post all these Insta stories about the movie and TikTok. But I'm really excited that this changed their life, and perhaps in some ways my life as well. Okay, next one. Oh, I just have pictures of my students. I feel like I spoke for so long. Yeah, it's okay. So I just want to talk a bit about my work now. Once I left Kedah and Adiwiraku happened, I always ask myself, like how do I beat that, right? How do you beat having a movie made out of you? Like, whatever I do in my life is going to pale in comparison. I have to like win the Nobel Prize next, right? And I feel like I was always going to be measured against this movie, right? It's always going to be, oh, Cheryl, the Sekolah Kampung teacher, or Adiwiraku, it's always going to be that. But it was not. I felt like my journey in education was just getting started, and there were so many more things that I can do and so many more ways that I can change the system that I was very angry with when I was teaching. One of the first things that happened when I came out is I was appointed as the Jawatan Kuasa Kajian Dasar Pendidikan Negara under YB Mazli at that time in 2018-2019. And I received the most hate from netizens because I was the youngest. Actually, I was already 35 at that time, right? I'm not that young. So I was the youngest in the Jawatan Kuasa. I was the only one without a professor or a doctor to my name. Maybe perhaps I was a woman, minority, I don't know. I received a lot of hate from netizens, and they were like, why is she in a policy review committee when all she did was teach choral speaking? So they reduced all my work to just teaching choral speaking. But it didn't matter. I think for me, I knew that when I worked on policies, It was really to understand the issues on the ground. And for whoever that was in the Jawatan Kuasa and all their experiences, the experiences that I had is very unique as well. And I'll say this as well for all of you, right? I think when you are, although I wasn't very young, but when you are young, people will repeatedly try to undermine you and undermine your experiences and to say that you're not good enough for something. And especially if you're a woman leader in your field. I think it's very easy to bully women or to bully them into thinking that you don't deserve a position that is given to you. And of course, you hear all these voices, right? You see all these netizens comments, and they would DM me stuff and all that. And it's easy to feel like attacked, but you must always know that why are you doing this, right? I was doing this because I really believed that we could change something in the education system. And it of course starts by working on policies. We continued on with the policy. They didn't remove me, and I worked on it for 1.5 years, I think, 6 months, and then we did a few review for the policies as well. Besides that, I also started an organization called PEMIMPIN. This is my team, and in PEMIMPIN, we work with underserved schools around Malaysia to help the schools and the teachers and the leaders in the school improve the way they teach. I think when I was teaching, my biggest frustration was that you just need to teach better in classrooms. Teachers need to teach better in classrooms. And all of this, all our education problems can be solved, right? But teachers are always burdened with a lot of administrative work. We're burdened with a lot of unnecessary things that it's so hard for us to teach. So in the work that we do, we really try to support schools and to help them on how best they can use technology to improve their schools. So that's what I do now. And I also have a family. I have like 2 really cute kids who are like handful. And I think, again, just bringing back to this whole women leader thing, the question that I get asked all the time, if not every day, is, Cheryl, how do you do it all? Like, how do you manage a family and how do you like run an organization? And I get a little bit offended when people ask me that, because I don't think they ask male leaders that, right? Do you go to like a successful male CEO and ask, so how do you manage your family? They wouldn't even know if he has a family, right? But ever since I have a family, it became like people love interviews. They always ask me, how do you manage with 2 kids? And I'm very lucky. My husband is very hands-on, he's very supportive, and he takes care of the kids. But I don't think it is a managing thing. I don't think you have to pick whether I want to be successful in my career or successful in my family. I think you can have it all, right? You just need to know how to balance your time and how to find the right amount of time that you allocate for what you're working for. But if anyone tells you, especially if you're a woman, that you can't have it all, it's a lie, right? You actually can. And you can do it all, and no one needs to question you on the choices that you make. Suddenly like a woman empowerment talk pula. But it's true. That's true. And I think also being a lot of my Adiwiraku fame has gone off, thankfully. Except this series is called the Adiwiraku series, right, Prof? So it's come back again. But I also try to speak about education in the public space using whatever fame I have from the movie, and really trying to advocate for a lot of young people to get into education and not just do it because I want to be a teacher or like it's anything, right? But do it because we really care for our future generation and we really see that we can change something in Malaysia. I think, especially when I was younger, we talk a lot about the problems in the country, right? Macam, this is not right, this is not right. If only this politician did this and that. But I also think that sometimes we need to reflect a bit on ourselves and think about what is my part here and how am I contributing? And some days I don't even want to know the policies or like the news that's going on in education. And I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on what we are building and see how we can make a difference. So in whatever small ways, whether it is teaching one student or whether it's teaching a class, you have to keep asking yourself, what am I doing to change this? And I think when you keep asking yourself that, you will see some difference in your community. You don't have to think big. It doesn't have to be a big fancy thing, but it has to be that small little changes that will lead to big things, right? Yeah? All right. I can open for questions early because I'm like a bit breathless. It's not easy speaking with this mask, right? One of my favorite poems that I always think about is The Invitation. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living, but I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. And I think as you are thinking about your careers, or as you are, in your first year, I think Alex told me she's in her first year of university. How can you do what you're doing for but make great impact? Or how can you do something that is so meaningful for your community? I want you to always have that at the back of your head as you're thinking about this. And if you risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, and for the adventure of being alive. So I hope you always think about this. And now I will take the many questions that you have, right? You guys have questions, right? Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cheryl, for the lovely sharing session. Moving on to our next agenda, I will now make way for the participants to ask any questions that they have. Please step forward to the microphone, introduce yourself, and ask away.
Or you can just use your teacher voice. Teacher voice.
All right, okay. Good morning, Ms. Cheryl.
Morning.
I just wanted to know, like when you teach students, right, especially students with low proficiency level that you have experienced, will you ever experience burnout? Because I'm pretty sure every teacher here has usually experienced burnout at least once a week. So if you do you have any tips to overcome it or give yourself any motivation for it?
Thank you so much. Yeah, of course, right? Who doesn't, right? I think I still experience burnout till today. So I think, especially teaching, because it's such a intense process of like trying to get them to understand you. You would feel very tired at the end of the day, and you would just need to like lie down and like sleep for like 10 hours and like nobody wake me up. So one thing I do, I try to prevent burnout from happening by trying to pace myself. I have the tendency of trying to do it all. I'm like, yes, I can do everything, right? But I've been trying to pace myself out better. So say no to things that I'm not good at or I don't think I want to do. When you're in school, and especially if you're a young teacher, and if you're not married, right, they will throw everything at you. Cikgu pengangkap lah, rumah sukan lah, ketua rumah sukan lah, all these things they will throw. It was so important for me to try to manage that so that I don't get burnout. But if we do, and it's inevitable, then we have things that I will do to help me get better. For example, I just go out with my friends, or like eat my favorite food, or like sleep for like so long. I would go back and visit my family in KL. But you can't help it lah. Yeah, I think it's just part of the process. But in your head, you must know, if this happens to me, how am I going to manage it? And to tell yourselves and tell your friends that to check up on you, or if you get so bad at your burnout that it's affecting your mental health, how can your friends come and make sure that you see it? Because sometimes in the inside of us, right, we are just working, but people on the outside can see like, oh my God, this is at the brink of a mental health breakdown. So it's very important to take care of your mental health as well. Just use your teacher voice lah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Joanne. So my question is, how do you work with stubborn students, and what was the first thing that you did?
You mean what ketegak students, right? Stubborn students. Yeah. So in the first few months, right, I would have students who would refuse to do work. So I would be begging them, just pick up the pen and write, speak up, and they would be like, no. No? And especially when you teach secondary school, right? They're already so angry and, so angst-driven or like hitting puberty at like 14 years old kind of a thing. And I would just be like, please, just write, just pick it up. Teacher will tell you what to write. And they'll be like, no, I'm not doing it. So what? So what? And of course, my first response is very angry lah. I'm trying to change your life here, and you are like, so what? So what do you want to do? You want to hit me? They would challenge you, and they would make you really angry. So my first thing is I would ignore them. I would just, okay, wait first. I'm going to talk to all the other students, and then I would use like peer pressure, right? I'd be like, everyone in this class is amazing, your life is going to change. But I would not say that your life is not going to change. I would just talk about all these other kids who were doing stuff. And peer pressure works really well. They'd be like, oh, might as well just pick up a pen and do it. Or I would just wait for like after school so I'm not embarrassing them in front of their friends. I think sometimes when you go to them and like their friends are all watching and you're like, right, and they'd be like, lagi, they try to be defiant. So I would wait for like, all the kids to go home, and then I would just ask like, okay, what happened actually? Teacher just wants to help you and try to understand. Usually students like this come from, it's not your fault as a teacher, I think they come from very troubled backgrounds. And it's not that they're angry with you, there's a lot of other things that makes them angry. So while we as teachers get very angry, I try not to take it personally and try to understand where the student is coming from. I think that's very important. But yeah, all right.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Farha. So I'm curious about your time during your while you were in policy. I'm curious on what is your opinion of the current education policy?
Is there a recording? I think the biggest problem here is that every time a new minister comes, we get a new policy, right? And it's very frustrating because sometimes we feel like, wow, this minister has made X amount of progress, but then the new minister comes and they don't want to take or carry on the legacy. They just want to start again to build their own legacy. And at the risk of all of this is our students lah, kan? They struggle with all these different policy changes. The teachers struggle with all our different policy changes. But having said that, I think the civil service, that means the timbalan pengaras and all that in KPM have been quite consistent and quite strong in pushing through the changes that they want to see. That's been quite encouraging, especially, for me, especially since I work with them, I understand what they've been trying to do. They've been very supportive of the work that we are doing, and they've been trying to push changes. Policies per se, we could do so much better. That's all I can say. We can do so much better. Malaysia is a country full of potential, full of smart people. We can do so much better lah. We're not doing enough. Yeah. Non-political questions. Anything? Yes.
Mrs. Fernando, my name is Dania. Since you were teaching in a small school, right? So how do you cater to their I believe that in a class there are mixed proficiency students. Like how do you cater to their needs? Like how? Yeah.
Okay. So I do something which I'm sure you will learn. It's called differentiated learning. It's a lot of work, but I feel like the efforts of it is quite it's quite rewarding. So I would divide them into different groups based on their proficiency, and then give them different work to do based on their proficiency. It is a lot of work because firstly I need to do a baseline to understand where they all come from. So I need to study first, okay, my students' level is at what? Like, okay, this one is at standard 1, this one is at standard 2, this one is at standard 3. And then every lesson I need to cater to meet to all their needs. And then usually I would do like one lesson where we do like in a big group. So something fun that they can all get together. I was also very careful because I said I had like, maybe in one class I have like 5 or 6 students who cannot read at all, and they would be so embarrassed to be doing the ABC, like follow the dots kind of a ABC. So they would be doing it under the table. So what I would do is that I would make that ABC worksheet macam it's like a normal worksheet, like a normal grammar worksheet kind of a thing. because I don't want to embarrass them that they are the ones in class who cannot read, and they don't have to hide and do their work. So I would try to make them feel a bit, it's important, especially when you work with vulnerable communities, that you give students that dignity, and you tak macam, dah form 1 tak boleh baca lagi, but you give them dignity and you help empower them. So differentiated learning really helped in my classroom. I'm sure you have a course on that coming up, right, Prom? Or if you're doing that already. There's a whole big syllabus on it and how you can do this better. Yep. All right. Yes.
Hi, Mrs. Fernando.
Hi.
So what was your biggest lesson you learned from teaching?
Okay. Besides everything that I've shared with you in the all right. I think for me it's humility. Sometimes when you go in, and I must admit, I'm very honest, if you don't already know, when you go in, especially if you are from a different socioeconomic background, it's very easy to go in and think, alamak, what happened to this community? Why are students not learning? Like, this is just, it's so crazy, it's easy to judge. But when I went in, I learned a lot of humility. I learned to really understand and accept where my students are coming from, and not to project whatever I believe to be an excellent education on them. And my students in return also taught me a lot of humility, because as much as I didn't know, as much as they didn't know, I didn't know stuff as well. So at the end of every class, I would give them 10 minutes for them to teach me all the Logat Kedah words. And they loved it, because it shows like, oh my God, my teacher is just like me. She doesn't know things. And that helped to really break the barrier. And I also learned, like, in any situation, when we enter with a lot of humility, with a lot of empathy, not just sympathy, right? Sympathy is you rasa kesian, tapi empathy is you actually feel for the students. It made a lot of difference. And I'll give you one example since we are on it. A lot of people like to say, a lot of KL bangsa bubble type of people like to say things like, oh, you know, the poor people like to have a lot of kids, right? Oh, kenapa, you already know you're so poor, why do you have a lot of kids? And honestly, when I went in first, I used to think that, right? My students were like from 4, and some of their mothers were still giving birth to their like 7th or 8th child. And I was like, why are you doing this if you have no money, right? But I failed to understand that a lot of poor people have this thing called like decision fatigue. They are so tired of making decisions that it impairs their judgment to make sound decisions. Everything in their life is a decision. If for you, you don't have to think where my next meal is coming from, or where money from my next meal is coming from. Or for you and I, or at least I assume, right? We don't have to think. But for these students, for these families there, everything was a decision. And this impairs their ability to make sound judgment. Things that we see so simple. Don't have more kids. But it's not so simple for them. And from that, and watching all of that, taught me a lot of like empathy and understanding where this community comes from. So yeah, that's the long answer. My biggest lesson. And I'll never buy Starbucks again. I think it's not nice and overpriced. Yes. Anything else? Give me some hard ones here. Anyone first, yeah.
Hi, Ms. Fernando. My name is Hazim. My question is, what was it that gave you the strength to keep on going, even though you had to face all those challenges?
Yeah. Let me think. Okay, I'll tell you one of my biggest challenge that I didn't share here, right? Somewhere in 2015, in August, right? It was really sad, but there was this huge rumor in school, started by some of the teachers, that I wasn't there to teach, I was actually there to convert my students. It's very typical, especially if you are a non-Muslim going into a community. It's very typical. Now looking back, I can laugh at it, but when I was there, I was very irritated, I was very annoyed, because I thought it was not fair. The 2.5 years that I was there, I had done nothing to show people that I was there to convert. I'm like, I'm not at all here to convert you, I'm just here to teach you. But you know, some teachers, I don't know, so they started this whole thing, and then my students were like, teacher, is it true you're here to convert us? Teacher, is it true you have like holy water in your car to like sprinkle on us, and it was just getting ridiculous. And the rumors were things like I was like funded by the church. I'm like, my church is so poor, they have no money to fund me. I was funded by the church lah. I was organizing a trip for my students to come to KL, and then the rumor was that there was going to be like their ultimate baptism ceremony. And how do people even think of these things? So it was crazy, but I must admit I was very hurt. I was very angry, and I thought it was very unfair, and I felt like quitting because I thought like, what's the point, right? I have done nothing to show you that I'm here to convert. I'm not. And to say all these things, it's really fitnah lah. It's not true, right? I spoke to the teacher and I asked her, and she said, oh, we just have to be careful because you're so nice. We just want to know what is your niyat. And I macam, okay, I have no other niyat except to teach, right? But I also try to understand where they come from. You know, obviously I'm an outsider coming into the school, and I think that was my biggest challenge. But my students were amazing. They would back me up. So the rumor not just was in school, right? It spread to the whole kampung, right? And for like that 1 month, I was like this, macam, you know, like really ostracized. Like my students would be like so scared to like sit in the car with me because people will think that I'm going to take them to like the church or something. Or like, it was so ridiculous, but it was so true, right? When I say this, I'm like, it doesn't even, like, I can't even brain these things, right? But I think the lesson that came out from there is the relationship that I built with my students was so important because they backed me up like crazy. They were very angry at all the teachers who started the rumor, and they told the teachers like, actually the only nice person in the school is teacher Cheryl, right? And that was enough for me. Like, I didn't need all those adults. Yeah. So, there you go. Right, yep.
Hello, Mrs. Fernando. My name is Sadi. So earlier you mentioned that you are changing your aim from teaching English to making them literate. But with how the school system is, with how exam-oriented it is, and our obligation as teachers to follow the syllabus, how do you find a middle ground for both of this?
Yeah, very, very nice, very interesting question. So I would teach my students like ABCs and all that, right? And basic English, right? But they had to do the standardized exam. And then when the exam scores came, they would all get 0, right? And they'd be like, teacher, you told me I'm good already. What is this? And I was like, oh no, what do I do? So how I try to reconcile is that I try to teach them parts of the exam that they can answer, just because the system is such lah. In a normal world, I don't think it's fair for me to do that, teach to the exams, but I didn't want them to see that 0 in their paper after all the work that I've done to teach them how to reach like standard 2 literacy. Tapi your Form 1 paper, you still 0, right? So I would just teach them parts in the paper that they can do, that they can memorize. I feel so bad for saying this. It's not the best teaching strategy, but I just needed to do that so they could just pass, or not pass, at least get 10 marks or 20 marks. And then the other parts of it that I'm teaching them, they improve there. But it's really difficult because of our standardized system, and very unfair to the students as well. Yeah. Yes.
My name is Sarah. I would like to know more about your educational background, since you are not in the education field, but you were originally in the management studies, but then you found a way in the educational path. So you took a postgraduate diploma in education. I would like to know more about it and how it could help someone who's not interested in teaching in the first place be able to teach later in life.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your question. So I also did, before my switch was also through Teach for Malaysia, right? And in Teach for Malaysia, they provided us with like an 8 weeks like immersive course in teaching, and it helped us to gain like all the basic strategies that we need to at least teach. we were taught by the trainers from Teach for America, so their teaching styles were very different. And it was very interesting and very new, and it was unlike anything that I have done before. When I did my PGDE, my postgraduate diploma in education, it then really strengthened the concepts and the theories I had of teaching. But teaching is also something quite experimental for me when I first started. I macam, okay lah, we try and see. Fail means then tomorrow we try again, which is not the best advice. But I think sometimes all the theories and all the strategies that you study, right, is only put to the test on the first day of classroom. And the kids are looking at you and like, what do you have planned for us? And if you don't have a plan, then they have a plan for you, right? So for me, it was really like, how can I research more? How can I learn more? I read a lot. I watched so many YouTube videos. I went and read all these books to see how I can really improve my strategies in the classroom. So it's a lot of trial and error. I don't think anyone, like you can go in with like a PhD, but the moment you face the students, especially sekolah menengah, then you know it's a whole different ball game then. Someone at the back had a question.
I'm interested to know more about PEMIMPIN GSL and like how does your day-to-day look like within an organization like GSL?
Okay, very busy, very tiring. So I how does day to day? So I start my day with my son waking me up at 6:30, and like I want to eat oats. That's what he says every morning. I want to eat oats. I want to eat oats. It's oats every morning. I start my day. We have a team of 12. I recently got on board, I don't know if you know this person, Samuel Isaiah, who is the global teacher, top 10 prize. So he recently joined me last year, July, after 10 years of teaching. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is, right now we have started our trainings. So we do workshops for schools. So it's now online. We're also planning a 15 schools intervention for Orang Asli schools in Pahang. So right now it's a lot of trips to Pahang, to talk to the JPN there, to select the Orang Asli schools that we can work with. We design the modules, we design the curriculum, we look at the measurement and evaluation part of it, and how can we really provide training for schools to really help them change and improve the way they teach. So that's what I do every day. Yeah, besides give oats for my son. Yes.
Yes. Hi, Ms. Fernando. My name is Justin, and as you mentioned in your story just now, when you told your parents that you wanted to be a teacher, I'm sure they were very shocked, and I'm sure we share this similar stories as well, where people will say, oh, teaching is boring, or teachers get low salary, like this perception is there. So what do you think is like the best way to change this perception?
Thank you, Justin. My brother's name is also Justin. I think, but now more than ever, I feel like the perception towards teaching is slowly changing. I feel like people are viewing teachers in a much more professional light, but it doesn't help, especially perhaps older generations. They still think of this as a very, like a very lowly profession, or macam you have no choice, so that's why you became a teacher, or you have no other job, that's why you became a teacher, right? But I think it's up to you and your generation to change that, right? With the advent of social media, and I know people say teachers should not use like TikTok and stuff like that, but I feel like teachers are showing them that there's a new way to do this, there's a better way to do this, and that's why like people like me and Samuel and all that, when we come on teaching, we're like, we're going to do this really well, and we're going to show people that this is actually a career of choice, right? And when you go in and when you make a difference, I think that's the ultimate reward for you. So it's difficult. I mean, my parents, okay, honestly, until today, I'm not sure my parents know what I do. So they're like, okay, you're not teaching anymore, so what do you do? So I said, oh, I train. And they're like, oh, does anybody listen to you? I'm like, I don't know. So they're not sure. But I think the way, I mean, our world has changed so much, right? And I imagine in 15 years' time, I won't be sure what jobs my kids are doing, right? And we're preparing kids for jobs that don't even exist. So it's up to us, it's up to all of you here to make the teaching profession sexy again. So that's on you, not on me anymore. Yes.
Hi, Ms. Cheryl, my name is Ani, and I want to ask, as you can see, most of us here will be like future teachers teach this rich generation? Like some of the students are having like my brothers are having this burnout, this stress. So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I think the generation that's upcoming, it's going to be very different. This is the generation that's very empowered. And I look at my daughter, right? So my daughter is 5 and she goes to a experimental design thinking school, which my husband thinks I'm absolutely crazy for doing, but I mean, why not, right? So my daughter, her whole syllabus is to solve problems. So they would give them like she's only 5, right? So they would give them problems to solve, and from there she learns the things, how to solve problems. So for example, if she's learning about continents, right? So usually you just learn the continents, but for Leia, she learns the continents and she learns the issues in the continents. So macam, Africa has like water issue, and like Asia has pollution, and her teacher, they even teach them on like privilege and consent, and they teach them on how do you do mindfulness every day, how do you step back when you're angry and all that, which I think it's really the future of what schools are for our kids, which is why I took the risk to put her in the school, even though macam my husband's like, what is the syllabus for this, right? And I feel like that's what we need to be teaching our kids in the future. We cannot prepare them for jobs that don't exist, right? They're going to be working in completely different fields, but we can give them the skills, we can equip them with the knowledge, with the motivation for them to be able to deal with the problems of the future. And a lot of people say like the jobs of teachers won't be relevant anymore, but I disagree. I think teachers will always be there as facilitators, as guides, and to really help them unleash their potential, right? The role of the teacher will always be relevant. So that's the future. Yes.
Is it me?
Yes, you. Fabulous one.
Hi, my name is Harry. The year. My question is, so in your story, you're saying that the chorus speaking competition is basically the turning point to your students, right? Because it helps the students break through their fear of English. Basically, what you were saying, right?
One of the turning points.
So I'm just wondering, do you think had the chorus speaking competition had not happened, would you think that your student would you think it would be possible to destigmatize English if it's just limited to the classroom only?
Yeah, I think my very, very good question. Well done, Prof. You need to give him extra marks for that question. Yeah, I think my work started very early on, even before the choral speaking. And it was really because I was sharing just now how they were very afraid of speaking, people laugh at them and all that. And how do I break that in the class to the point that they are brave enough to actually do the choral speaking? So it was a journey. It just didn't happen because I'm going to enter this choral speaking competition, suddenly I'm not afraid of English. It didn't just happen that way. My students would even put up a lot of performances in school. So we would take like all these famous pop songs, like at that time was Blank Space, right, by Taylor Swift, not the Taylor version at that time. So we would take like Blank Space, and then we would rewrite it, and then we would perform it. So we have been working, because it's a work in progress. It doesn't just take one competition to change your life. And all of that build up, and the choral speaking was a very nice bonus, a very nice incentive to add on to how they were already feeling about English. So it doesn't just take one event, it's a whole build up of things. Yep. All right. Awkward silence. Yes, Justin.
Yes, I think you and Samuel both shared the same story where you both planned to teach in KL or like in the cities, but ended up in rural areas. If you rewind back time, would you make the same choice again to go to rural areas?
I mean, if I knew I was going to have a movie, of course I'd make the same choice. No, I think however I'm making it out to be, maybe it sounds a bit more idealistic than what it actually was on the ground. I don't think it was a lot of stress on honestly coming out from like KL, right? I lived in a house that was so small. My house rent was like 250 ringgit. I had like the toilet is the floor, the changkung toilet. We didn't have like proper air cons in the house, of fans. It was really hot. And I don't know if you know, in like northern side they have this Charlie, this insect called Charlie. Yeah. Okay, if your friends don't know, you can tell them what is Charlie. So we had Charlie in our house, and like once Charlie like stings you, you get it really bad. So they have all sorts of challenges in where I lived. So I don't know. Maybe I would have chose an urban school, but it's not easy lah. I think it sounds very nice, and as a young person, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna live the Sawapadi life, you know. But then when you go in, you're like, oh my god, Charlie is here in my house. So yeah. Yes. Justin's friend.
Yes. I'm curious to know, like, how when you go to a new school, right? Like, they have already systems in place, right? And you being a newcomer, like, you want to implement a lot of changes. I'm sure, like, there's a lot of like pressure from like others, maybe other teachers or the old administration that has already everything in place. So, like, how do you like go against that or try to propose something new? Yeah, where does that courage?
Yeah. I think, I of course don't go in and then the first day macam, okay, I'm going to change everything in this school, guys. Are you guys ready? Of course, I go in and I macam understand first the problems, especially, whatever that's going on in the school and in the classroom. It's very important to know, like my locus of control. So I know that my scope of control or my locus of control is my classroom, right? Within these four walls of the classroom, like I'm the boss. I can do whatever I want for my students, for the betterment of my students. If the teacher comes and observe and like, oh my god, Cheryl, your class is just singing the whole day, I would show them like a lesson plan that actually corresponds to what I'm doing. We're not just singing for fun. But there were a lot of things that happened in my school that it was beyond my control. The other is the things that happened to my students at home. If they were getting abused at home, if there was huge problems at home, my students who got pregnant at Form 4, these were all like, it's very difficult for me to control. I tried my best, but just now we were talking about burnout. You end up getting burnout when you try to control and change everything. So like for me and for all of you, as you go in, you must always ask yourself, what is in my control and what is not in my control, and whatever that is in your control, you do your best to change that. So, yeah. Right.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions?
Last burning questions.
Okay, if not, this marks the end of our event. I would like to end this lovely session by reciting a meaningful quote by Mrs. Fernando. I have never subscribed to the idea of wealth being purely a material consideration. I think I have always seen it in terms of the positive impact that one creates. I hope everyone can instill such mindset in them so we can make the world a better place. Thank you and have an amazing day, everyone.